Today is one of those rare occasions for a daily mass where the saint whose memorial we celebrate today, the first reading, and the gospel all have a connection. The end of the gospel is the very famous line used on most every vocations poster on every diocese everywhere in the world. The harvest is abundant, but the laborers are few. Ask the master of the harvest to send out laborers for his harvest. This call to pray to God for an increase in vocations to the priesthood, so that way young men can go out and lead the church and be those shepherds that God is calling them to be. And then at the end of the reading from the prophet Hosea, we hear that Israel is being led back into Egypt. Most of the Old Testament is always overshadowed by the Exodus event. And this idea of leaving Egypt, leaving this place of sin, and heading to the Promised Land, we can see not only just in the Old Testament, but here and now today, that our pilgrimage here on earth is a pilgrimage from a life of sin to a life lived with God, and ultimately to the Promised Land of heaven. And today's saint who we celebrate, St. Augustine Zhao Rong, I said that right, he has a story that's almost similar and sounds like it should be coming from the end of the Roman Empire or the beginning of the early church. He was a Chinese soldier during a time when the missionaries were being sent from Europe to China to evangelize. And a French priest was captured, and St. Augustine was assigned to guard this priest. And as this priest endured tortures and humiliations, St. Augustine saw how this man was able to endure every trial thrown at him and the great faith that he had in Jesus Christ. And so he went to this priest and asked for baptism. And shortly after his baptism, was then ordained a priest. And then just a few short years after his ordination, and having joined in the missions of going about converting the pagans in China, he too, along with many other missionaries and priests and lay faithful, were martyred. But it was St. Augustine who was called to be that shepherd to lead them through this time of trial, this time in Egypt, this time through the Exodus, where he shepherded them through their martyrdom to heaven. And so as we go throughout this day today, let us pray for vocations, that the Master of the Harvest will send out more laborers, that young men who are striving for holiness will answer that call.